Anti-racism school is in session. What? It's in session. Anti-racism is not a diet, it's a lifestyle commitment. 365 days a year, live a life that's anti-racist. Ashani, teaching you, giving you that truth with love, straight, with no chaser. Understand, graceful and mindful. Open your third eye and take off your blindfold. You ain't gotta agree to understand, but understand you gotta take a stand. Anti-racism school is in session. What? It's in session. Anti-racism school is in session. What? It's in session.
Ashani Mfuko wants to educate people about racism. She created a family-friendly monthly seminar called Anti-Racism School is in Session, and every month she'll be talking about different ways to be anti-racist.
Welcome to Anti-Racism School is in Session, bringing you an uncommon perspective to common issues related to racism. I'm your host, Ashani Mfuko, and on this show, we talk about how to become anti-racist, how to live an anti-racist lifestyle, and how to raise anti-racist kids. Why do we do that? Because we are committed to creating a more beautiful, safer, more equitable world for all people. The topic of today's show is the power behind systemic racism. The power behind systemic racism. I know when I say that, you might automatically think to yourself, well, the power behind systemic racism is obviously, it's money, it's greed, it's capitalism, right? When we look back on history and we think about chattel slavery and the transatlantic slave trade, we know that Europeans enslaved Africans and brought them here against their will and got them into this system of chattel slavery because they wanted to maximize their profits and justify getting free labor from Africans, which later became African Americans, right? So when we look at that, we understand that there is an aspect of greed. There is the foundation of capitalism, right, that is present when we think about systemic racism. But there's more to it. There's more to it because systemic racism is maintained and perpetuated by people, by individuals. So what's the motivation for the individuals who uphold and perpetuate systemic racism? What is their motivation? What's at the root? What's powering this whole system? That's what I want to talk to you about today. So I'm going to ask you 3 really important questions that are going to help you to reflect on yourself, dig deep, and really get clear on where you stand when it comes to systemic racism and anti-Black racism and anti-racism and also white supremacy, because that is the foundation of our society, white supremacy, right? So you need to understand where you stand and where you need to possibly make some changes and where you can do better. It's important to know better, but it's even more important to do better because lots of people know better, but they're still not doing any better. So I want you to be more committed to the cause than you are committed to your right to comfort, okay? So here are the 3 questions that I want you to think about as we're talking about the power behind systemic racism. The first question is, what is the source of your power? What is the source of your power? I was thinking about this today and I said, oh my gosh, you know what comes to mind when I think about these power dynamics that we see coming into play with systemic racism? I thought about my childhood and I remembered a situation that I was in. I was in elementary school, was at a new school, and I was being bullied. And so this particular child that was in a higher grade than me, that was much taller than I was, and I think that they had been kept back a couple of times, so they were definitely much larger and like taller than I was and just bigger than most of the kids in the school because they had been kept back a few times. And so I was getting bullied by this particular student. And at that time, my brother used to pick me up from school and walk me home, right? So I remember one day he picked me up and I must have looked upset or disheartened. And he said, well, what's going on? Why do you look like that? And I told him, I said, this student is bullying me. She's bothering me. And he looked at me like, say less. Say less, sis. I got this, right? So the next day when he came to pick me up, he asked me, well, who's the girl that's been bullying you? And so I showed him who it was, and he said, stay right here. I'll be right back. So my brother went to speak to this student. He was obviously older than both of us. He was not in the school. He was probably, I don't know, in high school maybe at the time. And went to speak to her, came back, walked me home. I had no idea what was said, what went down. All I can tell you, okay? All I can tell you is that when I went back to school, that student never bothered me ever again. Never bothered me again. Was never an issue. And I said to my brother, what did you say to her? Like, what really went down? What's really good? Because she never bothered me again. So it made me think about that story, because when I think of the power behind systemic racism, when I think of these power dynamics, and I'm asking you to reflect on what is the source of your power, I want you to think about if the source of your power is tied to you having power over someone else. Is the source of your power tied to you having power over someone else? When we look at white supremacy culture, it's all about domination and power and control. Well, what's the source of that power? What's behind that? I think that it really comes from an inferiority complex. It's like insecurity times 1 million, right? If you've ever been in a relationship with someone who is insecure, it is a miserable place to be. It is a miserable experience because they're constantly trying to control you and trying to dominate you and trying to get at you before you can get at them, right? It's like, well, I'm going to hurt you before you can hurt me, and I'm going to be suspicious of you before you can be suspicious of me. It's a really twisted mindset. But when you're insecure, you always feel like you need to control and dominate other people. And I believe that that's what we see at play when we look at systemic racism and people who uphold white supremacy. That's what's at play there. There's a deep-seated level of insecurity and an inferiority complex, whereas you think if you create equitable systems and laws and policies, if you create an equal playing field, then guess what? You're going to end up losing. So you can't allow that to happen. You have to have power, you have to control, you have to dominate other people, because that's the source of your power. And without doing that, you have no power. That's what some people believe. When you look at white supremacy culture, that's what some white folks actually believe. It's that white supremacist culture characteristic of either or thinking. If you win, I lose. If I lose, then you win. But we can't both win. We can't both win, right? And that's what messes people up. And that's what keeps them in this system, maintaining these systems, perpetuating these systems of white supremacy and racism. So I want you to get clear with yourself today and understand, what is the source of your power? Is it connected to you having power over someone else? I posted a video recently on social media where I was calling out white women, and I said, hey, white women, you have the power to dismantle systemic racism. You know why? Because the white men who are responsible for creating all of these unequal, inequitable, racist laws, policies, and systems and perpetuating them, they can't do it without your support. They can't do it without you enabling them. They can't do it without you protecting them and not speaking up, right? So white women play a huge part in this system of white supremacy and racism, a huge part. Now, this is the pushback that I got. Well, white women are victims of the patriarchy and of these oppressive systems too, right? They're dealing with a lot of their own issues as a result of these systems. But guess what? Even if that is in fact true, you still have power. And based on these systems, you still have more power than Black women and Black people. So you are closest in proximity to the ones who are really enacting a lot of this harm and a lot of these laws and policies that are dangerous, that are intentionally unfair, inequitable, and dangerous to Black people, Indigenous, and people of color. So what can you do? These are your family members. These are your fathers, your grandfathers, your husbands, your brothers, your children, your sons. So you can't say, well, I don't have any power. I mean, while simultaneously benefiting from these systems. And this whole idea of feminism, which we know is really white women power, is not about getting equality and equity for all women. It's about white women getting more of the power and domination that white men have, right? Getting more access to that, not making it equal for everyone. When you think about that, you are in a very powerful position, as a matter of fact. So you have to figure out, what's the source of my power? Am I only powerful if I have power over other people? Which leads me to my second question. Who controls your power? The first question was, what is the source of your power? The second question is, who controls your power? Because there's something called power by association. So if we go back to my story, where I was being bullied, there were kids that were there on the playground and at school while I was being bullied, and all they did was observe. They didn't say anything to the bully because in their mind, they have power by association. So because the bully is someone that people are maybe afraid of, or they don't want to approach this person, if they stay in proximity to the bully, then they think, hey, I'm safe. As long as I'm close to the bully, I'm safe. Or I have access to their power. But the reality is, you're never safe if the person that controls your power is outside of you, if it's someone else, right? So if you only have power by association, then that's not true power. Because the minute that that person decides they don't want you to have power anymore, what happens? You have no power. So you have to get clear on what the source of your power is and who's controlling your power. Is it strictly power that comes from dominating other groups of people? Is it strictly power by association? Is it power based on your social or financial status? I think of a story that I saw on social media where someone said, when I worked for this major global corporation, I had so much power. I had so much access. I used to get into all sorts of events and into rooms and, into conversations that I never would have been able to get into if I did not have that association with that company. And as a matter of fact, as soon as they left that company and they no longer worked there, they lost all the access. They lost all the power that they had by association. So the reality is, power that comes from external sources, power that is controlled by other people, power that only comes from association with other people, and also through your social or financial status, isn't really power. It's a false sense of power. It's an illusion of power. And when I think of white women and your role in white supremacy and upholding and perpetuating systemic racism and anti-Black racism, I see you as having an illusion of power. You have this fight against the patriarchy. You want equal rights. You want equal pay. But you don't realize that as you're trying to build up that house to get what you want, equal rights, equal pay, bodily autonomy, etc., you build it up and then you tear it down when you say, but Black women, you can't have the same power that I have. Oh, Indigenous women, you can't have the same power that I have. People of color, you can't have the same power that I have. I'm just trying to get myself up here with the power that the white men have. Well, do you really want that? Is that what you truly want? Because white men have gotten into positions of power not by being fair, not through meritocracy, not through anything that was earned, not through anything that was honest. They've gotten there through genocide, through enslavement, through rape, through racism, through systemic oppression. That's how they've gotten into positions of power and stayed there. Is that what you really want? I don't think that's what you really want. So you have to get clear on that for yourself. Do you want a true power that comes from within, that comes from God, that you were born with, that no one can take away from you? Or do you want a false sense of power or the illusion of power based on your association, based on your social or financial status, and based on upholding racist systems of oppression? Is that the kind of power that you want? You have to ask yourself and get very clear on that. Now, the third question, and the most important question in all of this, is what are you going to do with your power? How are you going to use that power? Are you going to wield your power? If you are a white woman, are you going to wield that power through white woman tears, through dominating and oppressing and trying to control black bodies and black people? Are you going to be calling the police on us because you want to wield that power, that white woman power that you have? Is that what you want to use it for? Or do you want to use it for good? Do you want to use it to empower others and yourself? Do you want to use it to tear down these oppressive, racist systems of white supremacy? How are you going to use that power? Now, you might say, hey, Ashani, I'm all for this. I'm an ally. I want to be anti-racist. I want to break down these systems. Taking down patriarchy and systemic racism go hand in hand. I get that. But there's always a but. I don't really have any power. I'm a stay-at-home mom. I don't have a lot of financial power. I am in a system where I need this job, and all of the people who are in positions above me are white men. There's not only so much that I can do. I don't want to jeopardize my livelihood. I don't want to jeopardize my family. I don't want to jeopardize my relationships. Well, here's the thing. Being anti-racist comes at a cost. And doing the right thing is not always the easiest thing. It's not always the most convenient thing. It's not always the path of least resistance. So if you're looking for an easy thing to do, the easiest thing for you to do is to keep doing what you've been doing if your source of your power has come from other people. It's come from pleasing the people who are already in positions of power, who have gotten there through illegal activity, through criminal activity, through dehumanization of black people, right? Do you want to be associated with that type of power, or do you want a true and genuine power that comes from loving and caring for other people, that comes from tearing down oppressive systems that you know exist, even though they benefit you, but you know that they're harming other people? That's a different type of power. It's a power that's rooted in love. It's a power that's rooted in compassion for other humans. It's a power that keeps you connected to your humanity as opposed to stripping you of your humanity so that you can dominate other people and you can control other people. Because that's what this country has been all about since its founding. That's what white supremacy culture is all about. It's about having power over black people, indigenous people, and people of color. It's about dominating. It's about hoarding power. Okay? That's what it's all about. So you're either for that or you're against it. And if you're against it, then your actions need to show that. You can't just say, well, I'm against that. I'm an ally. I'm all for this. But then your actions are saying something different. And for those of you who say that I'm committed to being an ally, I'm committed to becoming anti-racist, I'm committed to being a part of the solution and not the problem, but yet you always get defensive when someone calls you out, yet you always get defensive when someone says that's not it, that's not the right way, that's not how you do it. You get defensive. And as you get defensive, what do? You start wielding that power against the people that you say that you want to help and support. It doesn't work both ways. It doesn't work both ways. So you have to get clear on what type of power do you want to have, and how are you going to use the power that you currently have. When I think about reparations and the way so many white folks are triggered by any conversation about reparations for African Americans, for the descendants of the enslaved, I realized after posting videos on social media and getting thousands of comments and getting into these discussions, I realized that the issue that a lot of white people in America have with the idea of African Americans getting reparations has nothing to do with where the money's going to come from. Where's the money going to come from? How are we going to pay for that? I'm not paying for that. No one alive has ever been enslaved, and no one alive ever owned slaves. So why are we doing this? Right? It's not even about the money. This is what I have learned. It's not about where's the money going to come from and who gets the money. And I'm not paying for that. It's not even about that. It's about power. And it's about how does African Americans getting reparations impact the power of white people in our society. They want to know, how is that going to impact my power over black people? if they get access to money that I don't have access to, if they get access to resources that I don't have access to, if they get access to opportunities and all sorts of things that we don't have access to in the name of equity, how does that impact my power over Black people? That's what it comes down to. Because reparations for African Americans in the United States is not only about chattel slavery and its legacy, it's also about what happened after that and what's been happening ever since and what's still happening today. That's what the reparations are for. The fact is that it never ended. It never ended. You want to learn some more? Go look up sundown towns. Go learn some more about Black codes. Learn some more about redlining. Go do your own research and learn about the history that they are trying to prevent our children from learning in school. Learn about the history that you were never taught in school intentionally. They intentionally did not teach you the truth. They intentionally did not teach you the facts because they don't want you to know. Because when you know better, you're more likely to want to do better. And if you understand history and you understand how it relates to and impacts what's still happening today, we've seen it all in the news. We see it in our communities, right? The Tennessee 3, we've seen it happen. All of these mass shootings happening. It's a power grab. It's all about power. The fact that legislators, our elected officials, are so reluctant to create stricter gun laws, it's all about power. That's what it comes down to. It's about having the power to control other people, having power over other groups of people, because that's where a lot of people's power lies. They know without that, they don't have any power. That's what they believe. But the reality is we all have power. We all have power. Again, it's a power that comes from God. It's a power that is within us that no one can take away from us. So that's why we fight against these systems. That's why we fight against racism, because we say you won't take our power away because you didn't give it to us, so you can't take it away. So many white people in our country get more and more insecure because in their mind, they believe that someone's trying to take my power away. That's what's happening. So they dig their heels in. So they create more racist laws and more racist policies, and they put their racism out on display for everyone to see. They're not even trying to hide it anymore. It's because they feel like someone's trying to take their power away. And the only power they think they have is power over Black people and power to dominate Indigenous people and people of color. And without that, they're nothing. And that's what you see happening today. So if you are someone that says, I want to be a part of the solution and not the problem, get clear on the source of your power, on who controls your power, and on what you're going to do with the power that you have. Because you can use your power for good, or you can use your power for evil. It's all up to you. Now, you've heard the term knowledge is power, so of course I have some resources that I want to share with you today to help you in your journey of gaining more authentic power. And the first one I want to share with you today is from my business coach, the one and only Rachel Rogers. This is her book called We Should All Be Millionaires. This is a woman's guide to earning more, building wealth, and gaining economic power. One thing I love about Rachel's book is that it talks about the systemic inequities, the systemic oppression that has held so many women back for centuries, particularly Black women and women of color. So if you want to get some knowledge about how you can build wealth, how you can just be empowered to create a better life for yourself and a legacy for your family, build a successful business, this is the book that you want to read, so check it out. And another great book that I picked up recently while I was away on our spring break vacation is the one and only Tricia Hersey's book, founder of the Nap Ministry, Rest is Resistance, a Manifesto. Oh my gosh, I am so into this. I am so into this. I am all about rest being a form of resistance. So let's see what Tricia has to say. Disrupt and push back against capitalism and white supremacy by connecting to the liberating power of rest, daydreaming, and naps as a foundation for healing and justice. Listen, get into it. Rest is resistance. All right, so check this out. Make sure that you are always pouring back into yourself, gaining more knowledge, learning more, thinking critically, doing your own research, right? We want to be growing and learning every single day because anti-racism is not a diet. It's not something that you engage with during Black History Month only, or Juneteenth only, or on MLK Jr. Day only. It is a lifestyle. So make sure you keep learning and growing, and whatever you hear on this podcast, go ahead and research it. Go learn about Black codes. Go learn about sundown towns. Go learn about redlining. Go learn about chattel slavery and how it's different from other forms of slavery that have happened in other parts of the world. Do your own research. Keep learning and growing. And thank you for listening and watching. Make sure you download, share, subscribe, and rate this podcast, and I'll see you on our next episode.